Welcome to one of the greatest blunders in the history of everything, where anything that could possibly go wrong did. What is this strange event, you may ask? That's right, the Fourth Crusade.
To understand the Fourth Crusade, we have to go back in time, way back, to the year 1096 and the First Crusade. In the east, you have Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire. But all was not well, as the Seljuk Turks were threatening the city. Who are you gonna call? Not the Ghostbusters, but the Pope. Pope Urban II to be exact. Now the Pope was busy hanging out in Rome and attempting to control the politics of Western Europe, but he took some time out of his day to call the Council of Clermont. The Pope thought, hey, if I help the Byzantines, maybe they'll let me run their church again, and on the side, we can go reconquer Jerusalem. And so the Pope sent a crusade, the First Crusade, and surprisingly it actually worked. The Crusaders conquered the city of Jerusalem and opened it up to the Christian pilgrims. But victory was short-lived, and Jerusalem fell to the Turks again only 9 years later. Long story short, it was high time for another crusade.
Meanwhile, Constantinople was doing just fine. As the richest city in all of Christendom and the center of all the vital trade routes linking Europe to the east, its 500,000 inhabitants were fat and happy. But all this made its little trading rival Venice pretty angry. And if there's one lesson you can learn from all this, it's don't make the Italians angry. Because Italians will wait until your emperor is deposed and out looking for revenge.
Back in Europe, Pope Innocent III is ready for a crusade, but he needs England and France to stop fighting with each other, so they will fight for him. So, doing what any good living representative of Christ on earth would do, he lies. He writes a document claiming the Muslims are mocking the Europeans, and like any good feudal society, mocking is justification enough to start a war. And thus, the Fourth Crusade begins.
The major problem the would-be Crusaders have to overcome is just how to get from Europe all the way to the Holy Land. There are two primary ways to do this, through Turkey, which is full of angry Muslims, or through Egypt, which is also full of angry Muslims. Since Egypt can only be attacked by sea, and the Crusaders have no ships, they choose to go through Egypt. This is where everything starts to go wrong. The Crusaders hire the Venetians to build them a fleet to attack Egypt. Venice refocuses their entire economy towards building this massive fleet for almost 40,000 Crusaders. 12,000 show up. They manage to pay for half the fleet, but run themselves into total poverty. Meanwhile, the Venetian economy has been totally wrecked by the shipbuilding project, and their leader, Henry Dandolo, is in a pickle. How to pay for the ships? I know, he thinks. Let's go sack some cities.
The Crusaders make a deal with Dandolo to sack the city of Zara, a rebellious Venetian outpost, to help make up the rest of the payment for the fleet. The Pope excommunicates them. Dandolo doesn't tell them. They sack the city anyway. The Pope is really frustrated, but he can't do anything about it.
Remember that deposed Byzantine emperor? This is where he shows up. His son approaches the Crusaders with a deal. If they come with him to Constantinople and make his father emperor again, he will pay them a crapload of money, give them an army, ship them to Egypt, and craziest of all, will return the Eastern Church to the Pope. Suffice it to say that this deal is appealing to the Crusaders and to Dandolo. But Dandolo has a dirty little secret. He knows that the Byzantines don't have the resources to fulfill all these promises. But some angry Crusaders would be very helpful in reducing the Byzantine stranglehold on Eastern trade. So he goes along with the deal too. And now, to explain what happens next, it's time for Sam Johnson's Whiteboard of Wonder!
So the Crusaders travel on to Constantinople, which they immediately attack. For once, things seem like they're going okay. The imposter emperor runs away, despite the fact that his army is over twice the size of the Crusader army, and the Crusaders reinstate the original emperor like they agreed to do. Then, they run into another little problem. New emperor goes to get some money to pay the Crusaders, but then he finds out that the imposter ran away with 1,000 pounds of the empire's gold and jewels, thus leaving him just a little strapped for cash. With an angry army of Crusaders staring over his shoulder, he forces the citizens of Constantinople to melt down their Orthodox icons, which are conveniently made of gold and silver. However, he's only able to get about a half of what he needs to make the Crusaders go away. So he goes out and attacks one of his rival cities to get some money from them. But while he's out, the Crusaders get a little restless and burn down a massive section of Constantinople, leaving 100,000 people homeless.
You can see how all this might make the Byzantines just a tad angry. So angry, in fact, that an anti-Crusader nobleman named Ducas manages to overthrow and strangle the emperor. All this does, though, is make the Crusaders even angrier, so probably not a good move. Their latest slogan becomes, "The Greeks are worse than Jews." Good going there, guys. Now the Crusaders have finally had enough, and so they decide to sack the city and be done with it. On April 12, 1204, the sack of Constantinople begins. In just one day, the Crusaders totally overrun the city. They loot it completely, totally stripping it of wealth. The Library of Constantinople was destroyed, and they trashed the Hagia Sophia, as vividly described by author Sparos Veronis.
The Crusaders vented their hatred for the Greeks most spectacularly in the desecration of the greatest church in Christendom. They smashed their silver iconostasis, the icons in the holy books of Hagia Sophia, and seated upon the patriarchal throne a whore who sang coarse songs as they drank wine from the church's holy vessels.
After they finished wrecking the city, the Crusaders divvied up the spoils and the Venetians took their cut, including almost half the Byzantine Empire. The Crusaders turned the rest of it into the Latin Empire, which ended up being a complete and total disaster. Managing it sucked all the energy out of Western Europe, which stopped any crusades from happening during that time. Only 50 years later, the Greeks managed to retake Constantinople and re-establish the Eastern Roman Empire, but would never achieve its former glory again. And the original goal of reaching the Holy Land, almost nobody made it, and the Turks maintained their hold on Jerusalem.
So in the end, what was the impact of the Fourth Crusade? In short, it marked the end of an era. It was the final major European crusade, and though they tried a few more later, none were ever on the scale of the first four again. And perhaps more importantly, it marked the beginning and the end of the Byzantine Empire. Though it limped along for another 250 years, it never re-attained its former glory as the richest city in Europe. After the Fourth Crusade, Europe retreated back into its own affairs and wouldn't really emerge onto the world scene again until the Renaissance. So what have we learned? Number 1, never trust the Venetians. Number 2, don't sign up for a deal you can't pay for. And finally, when the church gets involved in geopolitics, things always go south. So if your pastor starts loading up his AK-47, just say no.